The year was 1307, and the night air over France carried a quiet unease that no one could name. By dawn, that unease became terror. Across the kingdom, doors splintered beneath the weight of royal soldiers. Monks were dragged from beds, ledgers were seized, and the red cross of the Templar order, once a symbol of divine courage, was branded instead as a mark of treason. King Philip IV and the Iron King had given his command: arrest every Templar, seize their wealth, and silence their voices. Only years before, these same knights had been the church's champions, guardians of pilgrims and gold alike. They had bled in the Holy Land, carried relics across deserts, and built an empire of faith and finance that rivaled the Pope himself. But now the tide had turned. Whispers of heresy and secret rites spread like wildfire, each accusation darker than the last. The Templars were said to worship strange idols, to spit upon the cross, to hold forbidden knowledge hidden even from Rome. As torches flared through the cobbled streets of Paris, few noticed what was missing from the chaos. At the western port of La Rochelle, days before the arrests began, the Templar fleet had quietly slipped away under cover of night. 18 ships, their sails furled like wings in the dark, carrying men, gold, and perhaps secrets too dangerous to ever surface again. While France burned with accusation, the sea swallowed their trail, and the legend of their disappearance began. In the western port of La Rochelle, the wind carried the salt of the Atlantic and the weight of secrets. There, anchored beneath the Templar banner, 18 ships waited in uneasy silence. They were not ordinary vessels. Their hulls were thick with oak from distant forests, their decks guarded by men sworn to an oath that reached beyond kings. When the order's downfall began, La Rochelle became the last heartbeat of Templar power. Then, on a moonless night, those ships vanished. Records mention them clearly: 18 ships, fully crewed and stocked for a long voyage. But after that night, the archives go dark. No manifests, no ledgers, no cargo lists. The port authorities' books are curiously scrubbed. The ink faded as if time itself chose to forget. Some said they were seized by foreign powers, others whispered of storms that tore them apart. Yet no wreckage ever washed ashore. Not a plank, not a nail. A single chronicler, writing decades later, offered only this: they sailed into history. What he meant has fueled centuries of speculation. Were they carrying the Templars' gold, sacred relics, or something far less tangible, knowledge forbidden by church and crown alike? Whatever left those docks that night moved with precision and purpose. The ocean took them without trace, and in their wake rose a mystery that refuses to die, a question echoing across 7 centuries. What secret was so precious it had to disappear forever? From the moment the Templar fleet disappeared, rumor became their only legacy. In taverns and monasteries alike, whispers grew of what those ships might have carried. Some claim they were heavy with gold stripped from the vaults of Jerusalem. Others that they bore relics looted from Solomon's temple itself, fragments of the true cross, the Ark of the Covenant, perhaps even the Holy Grail. Each tale grew wilder with time, yet none could explain the same unyielding silence that followed their flight. But gold tarnishes, and relics decay. What if the fleet carried something that could not be touched, something more dangerous than any treasure? Some historians suggest the Templars had amassed secret knowledge, maps older than known history, records of ancient civilizations, or teachings that contradicted the Church's authority. Such heresy would have justified their annihilation. To the powerful, ideas can be more perilous than swords. If the Templars truly uncovered truths capable of unmaking the faith that crowned Europe. Then the fleet's disappearance was not a retreat, it was an erasure, and perhaps that was the plan all along, to hide the unthinkable not in vaults or temples, but beyond the horizon where no one could ever find it. Long before their downfall, the Knights Templar had already mastered a domain that few associated with crusading orders, the sea. To most, they were warriors of the cross, men who carved sanctuaries in desert stone and bled beneath the walls of Jerusalem. Yet behind the armor and the oaths, they were something far more formidable, a global network of merchants, navigators, and financiers bound by secrecy and faith. From the Mediterranean to the North Sea, their fleet moved like a shadowed empire upon the waves. Templar ships ferried pilgrims, carried spices, and escorted treasures across the most dangerous routes of the medieval world. They built fortified harbors, mapped unseen coasts, and established coded systems of navigation that predated the great age of exploration by centuries. While kings struggled to keep their own navies afloat, the Templars operated with military precision, their ports in La Rochelle, Marseille, and Cyprus serving as arteries in a network of power that transcended borders. Historians remain puzzled by their sophistication. Some of their instruments suggest an understanding of magnetic declination. Others hint at celestial mapping techniques unknown in Europe at the time. How did warrior monks acquire such knowledge? And who or what first taught them to rule both land and sea? The Templars' maritime empire stretched like an invisible web across the medieval world. From the fortified docks of Acre in the east to the windswept harbors of Lisbon in the west, their ships moved with a precision that astonished their contemporaries. They traded silk and salt, ferried messages between kings, and transported pilgrims beneath the watchful gaze of their crimson cross. But beneath this open commerce lay a hidden network, a series of secret routes, known only to Templar captains and guarded with near religious devotion. These routes, some believe, extended far beyond the borders of any known map. There are records of Templar vessels sailing into the Western Sea, where the sun dies. Chroniclers dismissed these as poetic flourishes, yet traces of their presence linger. Strange symbols carved into coastal stones, unfamiliar coins washed up on Atlantic shores, and charts depicting lands that should not have existed in 1307. Could the Templars have reached the Americas centuries before Columbus ever dreamed of crossing the ocean? It's a theory dismissed by academia, yet tantalizing in its consistency. Perhaps their fleet didn't vanish in fear, but by design. What if they sailed west not to flee persecution, but to begin anew, to build a sanctuary beyond the reach of kings and popes? Among the few surviving Templar records scattered across dusty archives and forgotten abbeys, there are cryptic mentions of something called Magna Classis, the Grand Fleet. Descriptions speak of ships unlike any others of the age. Massive hulls reinforced with foreign timber, sails woven from rare linen, and keels shaped to cut through water at unnatural speed. Some accounts suggest these vessels could outrun any royal navy, crossing distances that should have taken months in a matter of weeks. Yet, just as the story begins to take form, the trail vanishes. Every official ledger after 1307 is either missing or meticulously altered. Page numbers skip, names are blacked out, and entire inventories have been scraped clean with acid. Someone went to extraordinary lengths to ensure the Grand Fleet left no trace in history. Was it the Church, purging records of a forbidden escape, or the Templars themselves, erasing proof of what they had built? Historians can only speculate, but each missing entry each ghost of a ship that no longer exists, whispers of a secret too vast to document, a naval force that may have sailed not just beyond reach, but beyond remembrance itself. La Rochelle was no ordinary harbor. To the untrained eye, it was a busy medieval port, filled with the noise of sailors shouting orders and the groan of wooden ships rising and falling with the tide. But beneath its surface lay a deeper purpose, the beating heart of the Templar maritime empire. From here, their fleets set out across the known world, and from here, they disappeared. The townspeople would later claim that even the waves seemed to obey the knights, that on certain nights the ships moved without a sound, their sails glowing faintly beneath the moon. Centuries later, archaeologists uncovered hints of what the eye could never see. Tunnels carved through limestone, leading from the old Templar warehouses toward the sea. Some ended abruptly in sealed chambers, others in collapsed vaults, still whispering of hidden storage. Goods too valuable or too dangerous for daylight. In one vault, they found scorched marks on the walls, as if fires had burned without air. Local legends persist that these tunnels were used during the fateful night of the arrests, when the Templars vanished. They sailed in silence, the fishermen say, and the sea swallowed their secret. Even today, La Rochelle feels haunted by what it refuses to tell. The story comes from a single voice, a merchant named Guillaume de Beaujeu, who claimed to have seen the impossible. In a letter dated October 1307, he wrote of standing on the cliffs beyond La Rochelle and watching, in the dim gray of dawn, as a procession of ships slipped silently into the fog. Their sails bore the crimson cross of the temple, and no oars broke the surface of the water. They moved, he wrote, as if drawn by the sea itself. His account was quickly dismissed as fantasy, the invention of a man seeking attention amid chaos. For centuries, historians treated Guillaume's words as myth until technology caught up with legend. In the late 20th century, sonar scans of the Bay of Biscay revealed something extraordinary, a cluster of large wooden structures buried deep beneath layers of sand and silt. Their alignment matched the design of medieval ships, yet their size was far greater than any known vessel of the era. No one can explain how they came to rest there, or why no records mention a fleet lost in that region. To some, it's coincidence. To others, it's confirmation, the silent echo of Guillaume's vision, proof that the fleet did sail, and that its trail ends not in story, but beneath the cold Atlantic. After the fleet's disappearance, history falls silent. Not a single confirmed sighting exists beyond the shores of France, as if the Templar ships had sailed off the edge of the world itself. The sea absorbed their trail, leaving behind only fragments, cryptic hints scattered across centuries. A few water-damaged log entries recovered from monastic archives speak of a wind from the setting sun and a course laid where no cross marks the map. Their language is cautious, coded, as though the writers feared their words might one day be read by the wrong eyes. Along the Atlantic coast, strange carvings have been found etched into seaside cliffs. Crosses of equal arms, circles intertwined with stars, and a peculiar compass rose pointing not east toward Jerusalem, but west toward the uncharted horizon. Locals call them the marks of the vanished. Taken together, these clues suggest a singular possibility, that the Templar fleet set sail into the unknown, guided by charts or knowledge lost to time. Whether they found new lands or perished in the abyss, no one can say, but the silence of their course feels deliberate, as if those aboard never meant to be found again. For as long as Christianity has endured, The Holy Grail has hovered between faith and fable. The vessel said to have caught Christ's blood at the crucifixion, a cup of infinite mystery and divine promise. To the church, it symbolized salvation and purity, but in whispered corners of Europe, it became something else entirely, a secret the Templars were said to guard. Across medieval chronicles and troubadour tales, their name and the Grails are intertwined like twin threads of the same riddle. Knights sworn not only to protect the Holy Land, but to defend a relic that could challenge the Church's very foundation. Some believed the Grail was no cup at all, but a hidden truth, a fragment of divine knowledge passed down through initiates. The Templars, with their oaths of silence and veiled rituals, became the perfect vessels for such a burden. As their power grew, so did the Church's unease. Could it be that beneath their armor and prayer, the Templars carried something the papacy could never control? When Philip's soldiers struck in 1307, they weren't merely seizing wealth. They were hunting for an idea, a vessel, a secret said to hold the light of God itself. Among the many artifacts seized from the Templars after their arrest, one stands out in the fragmented inventories that survive. A silver cup described as shining with no candlelight. The wording is peculiar, even poetic, and unlike the cold bureaucratic language of royal clerks. Some historians dismiss it as a flourish, yet others wonder whether it hints at something extraordinary. The cup was reportedly taken from the Templar commandery near Paris and delivered to the treasury under King Philip's personal seal. Then, within weeks, it vanished from every record. The chalice of Antioch, as later chroniclers would call it, was rumored to have come from the east, perhaps uncovered during the First Crusade in the ruins of a Byzantine church. Pilgrims spoke of its surface glowing faintly even in darkness, as if lit from within. To the Templars it was said to symbolize the unbroken light of faith, but to their enemies it was an object of heresy, a vessel that challenged the Church's monopoly on divine truth. When the Templar fleet escaped La Rochelle, could the mysterious chalice have sailed with them? If so, it might explain why Philip moved so swiftly to destroy every trace of the order, and why, to this day, the cup that shined without flame has never been seen again. The story of the Grail did not end with the fall of the Templars. Centuries later, as Europe awoke to the light of the Renaissance, its shadow reappeared, not in relics or chronicles, but in art. Painters from Italy to Flanders began embedding strange symbols into their sacred scenes. Chalices floating at impossible angles, knights kneeling with red crosses half concealed in the folds of cloth, background landscapes that subtly resembled the French coast near La Rochelle. These details went unnoticed by casual eyes, yet to those who knew the Templar lore, they were unmistakable echoes. Researchers argue that artists like Leonardo, Da Vinci, Botticelli, and Van Eyck may have inherited fragments of a secret tradition, messages encoded for those who still believed the Templars had safeguarded something divine. In certain depictions of the Last Supper, the cup before Christ bears an etching resembling the Templar seal, two riders on a single horse, a symbol of brotherhood and hidden purpose. Was this art a confession or a warning? Some claim it was a declaration that the Grail had survived, spirited away across the ocean beyond the reach of church and crown. If true, it means the lost Templar fleet did not merely vanish. It carried with it the most powerful relic in Christian history, hidden forever in plain sight. In the chaos that followed the destruction of the Templars in France, whispers began to drift northward to a land that had long stood at odds with Rome. Scotland, fractured by war yet untouched by papal control, became the perfect refuge for men branded as heretics. Documents from the early 14th century speak of foreign ships docking along its rugged coasts, their crews described as knights bearing the mark of the East. Though the church's spies scoured these shores, they found no banners, no armories, no evidence that could confirm their suspicions. Robert the Bruce, newly excommunicated and desperate for allies, is said to have welcomed these mysterious visitors. His army was small, his enemies vast, and a brotherhood of seasoned warriors with their own ships and gold would have been a gift from Providence. Yet no ship logs or royal accounts survive to confirm their arrival. It is as if the Templars appeared aided and then vanished again, ghosts moving through the mist. Some historians wonder if Scotland was never their destination, but merely a stop on a longer journey. Perhaps they had no intention of rebuilding in Europe at all. Perhaps the northern refuge was only a pause before the fleet turned toward something far more distant and far more secret. When the Battle of Bannockburn erupted in June 1314, Scotland's fate hung by a thread. Outnumbered and outmatched, Robert the Bruce's army faced annihilation at the hands of England's vast and disciplined host. Yet, in the heart of the chaos, something inexplicable occurred, an event that would echo through centuries of legend. Chroniclers wrote of a sudden charge that broke the English line, led by knights in white mantles marked with the Red Cross. Their arrival was swift and decisive, turning what seemed certain defeat into miraculous victory. Who were these horsemen? Some scholars argue they were remnants of Bruce's own cavalry, their armor mistaken for Templar garb in the haze of battle. But others see too many coincidences to ignore. The timing, 7 years after the Templar arrests, the secrecy surrounding their supposed allies, the fact that no records name these mysterious riders, as if they had appeared from thin air and vanished just as quickly. Believers, Bannockburn was not merely a triumph of strategy, but the repayment of a sacred debt, Templar knights honoring the king who had sheltered them. If true, it would mean that fragments of the vanished fleet lived on, fighting one last time beneath a banner the world believed destroyed. In the years following Bannockburn, the trail of the Templars dissolves once more into silence. No new records, no heraldic seals, no mention of their name in the chronicles of Scotland or France. It is as though they had stepped back into the shadows from which they came. The ports that once whispered of their presence fell quiet, and the sea reclaimed its secrets. Whatever fleet had reached the northern coast seemed to melt into legend, leaving behind only stories told in hushed tones, of white-sailed ships glimpsed beyond the horizon, sailing west into the endless blue. Why would they leave again, after finding refuge in triumph? Some say they feared discovery, that the church's reach would eventually stretch even to the highlands. Others believed they carried something far greater, a relic, a manuscript, a truth too dangerous to remain on European soil. Perhaps they sought a new Jerusalem, a place where faith and freedom could exist unbound by crown or cross. If the Templar fleet did sail west once more, it would mark the final act of their great escape, a voyage not of exile, but of purpose. And beyond that horizon, history loses their trail forever. Long before Columbus ever set sail, the Norse had already whispered of a western land, Vinland, a fertile coast where wild grapes grew and winters were kind. Their sagas spoke of strange stone shelters and forests without end. For centuries, historians treated these tales as legend. But what if the Templars, masters of the sea, inherited those forgotten roots? What if their vanished fleet followed a trail the Vikings had left behind. On the rocky shores of Newfoundland, researchers have found something unsettling: weathered carvings shaped unmistakably like the Templar cross. The symbols are cut deep into granite, their angles precise, their style unlike native markings. Nearby, remnants of old timber structures and iron nails, European in design, date to the early 1300s. Coincidence, perhaps. Yet the alignment of these finds with Old Norse sites raises a haunting question. Did the two worlds meet? If the Templars reached Vinland, they would have found isolation, safety, and secrecy, everything they needed to vanish completely. The church could not reach across an ocean, and the past would not follow them there. It would mean that the fleet's journey was not a desperate flight, but a deliberate pilgrimage to the edge of the known world and beyond. Across the cold waters from Newfoundland lies Nova Scotia, home to one of the most puzzling enigmas in North American history, Oak Island. Beneath its tangled trees and shifting soil lies a network of shafts, tunnels, and stone, markers that have baffled treasure hunters for over 2 centuries. But some believe it is not treasure they seek, but truth. The layout of the tunnels, their precision, and the symbols carved nearby echo unmistakably of Templar engineering, geometry intertwined with faith, secrecy fused with purpose. Early diggers uncovered flagstones marked with crosses pate, the same emblem carried on the sails of the vanished fleet. Others discovered coconut fibers buried deep underground, impossible in the North Atlantic unless brought deliberately. The design of the so-called money pit, with its descending platforms and flood traps, mirrors the cryptic architecture of Templar vaults once used to conceal relics, beneath commanderies in France. What if Oak Island isn't a hoard of gold, but a buried archive, a vault of forbidden knowledge sealed away before the Templars disappeared from history? If so, the treasure sought for centuries might not be wealth at all, but evidence, proof that the fleet succeeded in founding a hidden sanctuary in the New World, centuries before the Age of Discovery began. To mainstream historians, such tales belong to the realm of pseudo-history, stories fueled by wishful thinking and the allure of mystery. The Templars, they argue, were soldiers and bankers, not explorers. Their ships could not have crossed an unforgiving ocean. Yet even the most skeptical voices falter when faced with scattered anomalies. Pre-Columbian European relics, unexplained carvings, maps depicting Western lands long before 1492. Skeptics dismiss them as coincidences, misinterpretations, or modern fabrications. But others see a pattern too consistent to ignore. A chain of breadcrumbs stretching from La Rochelle to the Western Atlantic, each one whispering of a voyage erased from official memory. They remind us that history is written by survivors, and that silence can be as deliberate as confession. Whether myth or truth, the legend endures because it asks a question that history refuses to answer. Who truly reached the New World first? And if it was the Templars, then their disappearance was not a tragedy, but a transformation from a persecuted order of knights into the invisible founders of a new world, hidden beneath centuries of waves, stone, and secrecy. When the Templar order was crushed, the Vatican declared it had confiscated every record, every map, every scrap of parchment that might reveal the order's workings. Yet when scholars later examined the church's archives, a curious absence emerged. Thousands of scrolls, ledgers, and codices that should have been there were simply gone. Some believed they were destroyed to protect the church's narrative, while others whispered that the Templars had already foreseen their doom and acted first. According to these accounts, entire caravans of manuscripts were transported west in the weeks before the arrests. Sealed crates of vellum and wax tablets loaded discreetly onto ships at La Rochelle. If true, those ships carried more than relics or gold. They carried knowledge, the collective memory of one of the most powerful organizations in medieval history. Their archives, said to contain records of sacred geometry, star maps, and ancient sciences learned in the East, might have been the greatest repository of wisdom Europe had ever known. Historians can only speculate, but if the fleet did sail with the Templar library aboard, then the night of October 13th, 1307, did not mark the destruction of their secrets, only their departure. Among the few Templar writings that survived the purges are puzzling fragments, notes on geometry, navigation, and the movements of the stars. To modern eyes, they seem out of place, centuries ahead of their time. Diagrams show celestial alignments used not merely for prayer, but for precise navigation. Some even reference magnetic forces, hinting at an understanding of the Earth's poles long before the compass became common in Europe. How did warrior monks acquire such knowledge? The most convincing theory places the answer in the East. During the Crusades, the Templars spent nearly 2 centuries in contact with Arabic scholars, astronomers, and engineers who preserved the wisdom of Greece and Egypt. But there are details that defy even that explanation. Equations describing energy flow, references to harmonic resonance, and symbols resembling modern electrical circuits. Were these men simply brilliant scholars, or were they heirs to something older, a technological inheritance passed down from civilizations long vanished? To the Church, such studies bordered on heresy. Knowledge of the heavens was divine territory, and the Templars' fascination with it may have sealed their fate. Perhaps they were not condemned for worshiping false idols, but for glimpsing truths humanity was not yet ready to accept. In the 18th century, a rumor began to circulate among European collectors. A manuscript had surfaced in Venice bearing the Templar seal. It was called Liber Arcana, the Book of Secrets. Those who claimed to have seen it spoke of diagrams describing machines of light, rotating spheres of crystal and metal said to capture divine illumination. Some dismissed it as a forgery, yet others swore it was genuine. The final fragment of the lost Templar library, the Codex, appeared only once at auction in 1743. A bidding war erupted between anonymous patrons, and when the sale ended, the manuscript was quietly withdrawn. It has never been seen since. Some say it was bought by the Vatican and buried in the archives beneath Rome. Others claim it was destroyed by fire or hidden again, waiting for the right eyes to rediscover it. Whether real or imagined, Liber Arcana lingers like a ghost in historical memory. If it ever truly existed, it would mean the Templars had preserved knowledge far beyond the scope of their age. Knowledge that may have sailed away with their fleet, guarded not by swords, but by silence. When the Templar order fell, their destruction was not left to chance. It was orchestrated with surgical precision. Papal decrees swept through Europe like fire through dry parchment, commanding that every record, every mention of the Templars' maritime power be struck from the chronicles. Monks were ordered to rewrite their annals, substituting the names of knights and captains with blank lines or euphemisms. Cartographers redrew coastlines, omitting La Rochelle from maps of trade and navigation, as if the port itself had never existed. Within a generation, the Templar fleet had vanished not only from the seas, but from memory. Why such meticulous erasure? Ships, after all, are not heretical. Yet to the Church, These vessels represented something deeply threatening. They were freedom, vessels of knowledge and mobility, carrying men who owed allegiance to no pope or crown. Rumors of forbidden cargo, relics, texts, devices only heightened the panic. To the inquisitors, it was not the fleet's existence that was unholy, but what it might have carried beyond their reach. And so, history was rewritten by decree. What could not be destroyed was hidden, and what could not be hidden was denied, until only silence remained where once an empire of sails had ruled the seas. The church justified its purge with words torn from broken men in cold stone dungeons. Surviving Templars were tortured until confession became inevitable. They admitted to impossible crimes, spitting on the cross, consorting with demons, worshiping a mysterious head that spoke with divine power. The inquisitors recorded every syllable with triumphant zeal, never questioning the absurdity of their own accusations. But centuries later, scholars began to wonder, what if the knights were describing something real but misunderstood? Some confessions mention a metallic head that glowed with inner light and answered questions in an otherworldly voice. Could it have been symbolic, a metaphor for divine wisdom? Or was it something stranger still, an object of unknown craftsmanship? A few modern theorists suggest the Templars might have preserved relics of ancient technology, artifacts inherited from Eastern scholars or older civilizations. To an inquisitor, a machine that spoke could only be a demon. The church called it idolatry. The knights called it reverence. Perhaps in their own secret rituals, the Templars sought to commune not with false gods, but with knowledge itself, a force powerful enough to inspire fear and misunderstood enough to justify annihilation. When Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Templars, was led to the pyre in 1314, the sun was sinking behind the towers of Paris. Bound in chains, he looked upon the crowd, priests, nobles, and the king himself, and spoke his final words. The secret shall rise again. Historians have argued for centuries over what he meant. Was it vengeance, faith, or a warning that the truth could not burn? As the flames rose, witnesses claimed he showed no fear, his gaze fixed on some unseen horizon. Within a year, both Pope Clement and King Philip were dead, fueling the belief that Molay's curse had come to pass. Yet the deeper meaning may lie elsewhere. If the Templars' fleet had indeed escaped, carrying their relics and records into exile, then Molay's final words were not prophecy, but reassurance. The church believed it had silenced the order forever, but perhaps what it destroyed was only the shell. The true heart of the Templars, their knowledge, their vision may have already been far away, hidden beyond the seas, waiting for an age ready to uncover it. And in that sense, Molay's words were true. The secret did rise again. In 2006, a team of divers exploring the murky depths off Nova Scotia's Bay of Fundy made a discovery that defied logic. Buried beneath silt and seaweed, they found a cluster of massive oak beams and corroded iron fittings, unlike any known shipwreck in the region. When samples were carbon dated, the results shocked even the most skeptical observers. The timber dated to the early 1300s. Centuries before Europeans were thought to have reached these waters, something or someone had already been here. Marine archaeologists struggled to explain the find. The construction techniques didn't match Norse longships or later colonial vessels. The wood itself came from European forests, possibly French. Some dismissed it as debris carried by currents, but the scale of the beams and the presence of metal reinforcements suggested a large ocean-faring vessel. The question was unavoidable: whose ship had foundered here, and how had it crossed an ocean before the age of exploration? To believers, the answer was obvious. These remnants, they argue, belonged to one of the lost ships of the Templar fleet, evidence that the Knights did reach the New World. If true, then history's greatest maritime mystery doesn't rest on rumor, but on the ocean floor itself. Along the rugged coasts of Nova Scotia, Maine, and Newfoundland, explorers have uncovered a strange pattern etched into the rocks. Crosses pate, the unmistakable emblem of the Knights Templar. Weathered by centuries of wind and tide, some lie hidden in caves or atop cliffs that overlook the sea, their symmetry too deliberate to be dismissed as natural formations. Yet no record exists of any medieval European settlement in these areas. Archaeologists debate their meaning. Some claim they were carved by later settlers, perhaps masons or fishermen inspired by medieval tales. But others point to the precision of the engravings, their depth, their uniform spacing, and the fact that they align with ancient coastal landmarks, long predating modern exploration. Local Mi'kmaq legends even speak of white-sailed ships that came from the sunrise, bearing men who carved marks of the sun and crossed into stone before vanishing back into the mist. Could these symbols be the signatures of the vanished fleet, proof that the Templars had left their mark on a new world? Each carving seems to whisper the same message: we were here. And if the same cross that once adorned their sails now rests upon Atlantic rock, then perhaps the Knights' greatest voyage was not myth after all. When researchers plotted the locations of these carvings and artifacts on modern maps, an astonishing pattern emerged. The sites formed a deliberate geometry, lines and angles that mirrored the sacred floor plan of Solomon's Temple in Jerusalem, the very symbol upon which the Templar order was founded. Each point corresponded to a key chamber or pillar in the temple's legendary design, as if the builders had recreated their spiritual origin across an ocean. Skeptics call it coincidence, a product of overzealous pattern seeking. But the mathematical precision of the alignments challenges that dismissal. The distances between sites match ratios found in Templar architecture across Europe, from French cathedrals to Scottish chapels. How could scattered engravings in the wilderness reflect the same sacred proportions known only to medieval initiates? If intentional, the design may have been a message or a map. Perhaps the Templars sought to consecrate the new land, imprinting their legacy upon its stone. Or perhaps the pattern points to something still hidden, a final resting place for whatever they carried across the sea. In either case, the geometry is undeniable, as if the hand of the old world had quietly redrawn itself upon the new. Though the Templar name was erased by decree, its spirit never truly died. In the centuries that followed their fall, whispers of their legacy surfaced again, this time behind closed doors, beneath candlelight and under new names. The Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, the mysterious Brethren of the Cross, each claimed descent from an ancient brotherhood devoted to sacred geometry, enlightenment, and the pursuit of hidden truth. Their rituals echoed those once attributed to the Templars: oaths of secrecy, initiation through symbolic death and rebirth, the use of compasses, squares, and the rose. Some historians dismiss the connection as romantic myth-making, yet the parallels are undeniable. Masonic archives in Scotland contain documents bearing Templar seals, and the Rochelle Chapel, a masterpiece of stone and mystery, bears carvings of ships, stars, and crosses pate that seem to bridge the medieval and the modern. Perhaps the Templar fleet did not vanish at all. Perhaps it transformed, its knowledge surviving not through bloodlines, but through symbols, passed quietly from one generation of seekers to the next. If that is true, then the Order's great secret was not buried beneath the sea. It sailed through time itself, concealed within societies that would ensure the flame never went out. Centuries after the Templars' disappearance, their symbols began to resurface, subtle, deliberate, and hauntingly consistent. A compass rose etched into the cornerstone of a cathedral, always tilted west. A ship carved beneath a cross on ancient tombs. A Latin phrase found again and again in hidden corners of old manuscripts, non omnis moriar. I shall not wholly die. It was as if the vanished fleet had left breadcrumbs scattered through time, a quiet assurance that their story was not yet finished. In Renaissance art and architecture, traces of their code reappeared, the same mathematical ratios, the same sacred alignments to stars and solstices. Even early navigators, those who first mapped the New World, carried charts marked with crosses of equal arms, as though guided by invisible hands. Historians call it coincidence. Believers call it continuity. Perhaps these echoes were deliberate reminders, not of wealth or conquest, but of a mission that transcended both. The Templars' voyage may have been more than an escape. It may have been a covenant. Through symbol, art, and design, they spoke across centuries to those who would recognize their mark. Their message is simple, defiant, and eternal. We endured, our purpose remains. In the end, the mystery returns to where it began, to the silent ships that vanished into the Atlantic fog. Did they disappear by chance, lost to storm and sea? Or was their voyage a design centuries in the making? The Templars were not men who acted without purpose. Every fortress they built, every code they wrote, every voyage they undertook carried meaning. Perhaps their final journey was not a flight from persecution, but the ultimate act of preservation. If they truly carried relics, knowledge, or truths forbidden by the church, then they may have sought not refuge, but rebirth, a place where their legacy could survive untouched until the world was ready to understand it. And as their symbols resurface in stone, in art, and in thought, one cannot help but wonder, was that time meant to be ours? The ocean still guards its secrets, and the Templars remain its most elusive mystery. Yet their story endures, not as a legend of loss, but as a testament to endurance itself. For perhaps the fleet never vanished at all. It merely crossed into another age, still sailing, still waiting, beneath the endless horizon of history,